that losing you from wrestling hurt. And he said that a lot of fans didn't realize how good you were on so many levels. And he said it took about an hour and a half to get dressed up for this parody. And as you mentioned, he said it was his idea. Other folks say it was Terry Taylor's idea. Did you ever have a conversation with Kevin Nash or Terry Taylor about this parody and whose idea it was and how it came to be? Or what can you tell us about that?
Well, I went to Nash's room after we got back from the arena because I wanted to ask him if it was a personal attack, if I had heat with him, if this was, if this was his way to send to me not Arn Anderson, but Marty Lundy, a message, and Kevin looked me in the eye and he said, no, we're just trying to get heat. We're working here. And I believe him. I mean, if Kevin Nash has an issue with anybody, me included, I'm sure he would just address it directly and man to man, and that was it. But I had to ask because it was so personal in the attack I felt. It wasn't anything standard wrestling. It wasn't anything, and maybe that's why it lasted the test of time. There was so overboard. But I went to his room. Did I have a few beers in my hand? Yes, I did. Again, I'm never going to say, well, I never drank anything. I didn't drink a dozen beers every night after working out during the day and wrestling at night and have a dozen cold beers. Well, of course I did. There was probably a couple of nights I had 2 dozen. Not the point. The point is, don't bring it into the workplace. And I didn't, and they shouldn't have. But it is what it is. So I did have that conversation with Kevin, offered him a couple of the beers, which I think he took. And so I left it behind that day. When we finished our conversation, I put it behind me. I moved on. That was the end of it. And, if we weren't doing this podcast, it probably wouldn't have entered my mind one way or the other, and hasn't for years.
Nash has said that you guys knew what was going to happen beforehand, and it wasn't until the wives got involved and they said that you were made to look like, quote, a bunch of boobs, that there was an issue. And he said that apparently Aaron told you that Nash made you look like a stupid fucking drunk, and that the only heat that existed was residual heat from the wives. And he says that the cooler was yours. And when you confronted him later at the hotel and asked, as he said, with like 5 beers in his hands, Kevin, why'd you do that? He looked down at your hands and just got in the elevator, and you told the story that you went to his room. So whether it's getting in an elevator or the room or whatever, still, Nash feels sort of indicated that, hey, we were just doing art imitating life, but no heat after you guys talked that day. Did you ever have a conversation with Terry Taylor about it at all?
It came up before I even knew it was Terry's idea. I don't know when it came up, but it was years later. And I mean, a decade later, maybe. We were sitting around a room. I don't know if it was WrestleMania or, you know what I think it was? It was like when WrestleMania was in Orlando at the stadium, and Terry was working down for NXT. And those guys came over, obviously, to the show, and we're all sitting around a trailer, and that came up. Somehow, I don't know how that came up. Terry looked across the room at me and went, he used to call me Reverend, because I guess I'd start preaching or whatever the deal was. Preaching, being bitching, I imagine. But he said, yeah, sorry about that, Reverend. That was my bad. And I don't remember what my response even was to him, but I knew what he was talking about. I knew it was his idea then. And, it was a half-ass apology, He would have been one of the guys, first and foremost, back there slapping each other and high-fiving, the nWo when it was over. So it was what it was. My wife was insulted. more than me because I got a lot thicker skin. She's a regular human being and a pretty damn good one, to be honest with you. She's got a kind heart. She also knows this business is entertainment business. She, like me, just couldn't figure out that if they want to get heat on me, is that the only thing they're going to do? You know, is that all they got to use, you know, as a tool? And it is what it is. It'll be up to the test of time. You know, fans will tell you. That's the one thing I love about wrestling fans. They'll tell you when they love something, and, you know, if they love that, they'll go, why are you getting so emotional, Arn? You were a badass. You did some rotten things. You broke some people's legs. You broke some people's arms. 5 of you guys would scrub some guy's face in the cement. What are you getting upset for? Yeah, those were all wrestling angles, and they were all designed to have that baby face kick your ass when it was time, and it was all meant to draw money. This just looked like a Saturday night off the wall skit just to bury a bunch of guys, because maybe some of those guys, not even me, had heat with other members of that group. If you read between the lines.
This is coming. It's the parody of Arn Anderson's retirement speech done by Kevin Nash. And, we'll play that clip as well. But the point is, it's not very complimentary and, maybe not very polite. It's supposed to be funny. Clearly it was, because Wade Keller would report the spoofing of Arn Anderson's memorable retirement speech from the August 25th Nitro by Kevin Nash, Six, Marcus Bagwell, and Conan on the September 1st Nitro stole the show, but it didn't amuse the targets of the satire and thus led to a blow up backstage. Anderson and Flair were livid with some of the areas the satire ventured. In Anderson's case, he said afterwards that his wife and 12-year-old son were upset by the skit. He said his son was crying as a result, and his wife was upset that his drinking was now an issue on television. And Flair is upset that Six was mocking his dancing in the line. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, and I don't know why. Some of this, of course, is just funny, haha, but I think the idea that they're mocking what was a very real life sentimental situation is what maybe has struck a nerve. And the idea that maybe Arn had at different times had challenges with alcohol and Kevin Nash was making fun of it, maybe struck a nerve at home, and people are upset, and supposedly some tough words are exchanged. And depending on who you believe, a lot of the blame has fallen on Terry Taylor for this. What do you remember about this?
Obviously I remember that it happened. I remember the fallout from it. I remember I felt pretty bad about it, obviously. And as time has gone on, I feel even worse about it now than I did then. Cause I think I just have a better understanding of people, and I'm probably more mature now than I was back then. You know, when you're caught up in television and constantly trying to outdo yourself and push the envelope and break the barriers and all the other things that think out of the box, you know, however you want to say it, you know, you sometimes become desensitized to how certain things can make people feel. And in retrospect, probably one of the things I regret most in terms of allowing it to happen. You know, I get it. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. I remember, yeah, it was fucking horrible. I believe Terry Taylor was probably the agent, and I guess is why he would have been the target. But it's not really Terry's fault either. You know, you'll not hear me spend a lot of time on this podcast defending Terry Taylor. I like Terry, but he did a lot of stupid shit when he worked for WCW that caused issues. But in this case, I don't think Terry was necessarily to blame either, because the talent, you know, involved, they were walking pipe bombs, literally. And the process, you know, the good news is, and one of the reasons that Nitro was as spectacular of a television show as it was for a period of time, was because we didn't necessarily stick to word for word scripts. And we had a lot of talent who were capable, like we talked about with Arn and Ric Flair and, Roddy Piper and Randy Savage. There's a lot of guys that had that ability to go out and tell a story. And you knew that story was going to get told and it was going to be powerful. They were going to tell that story within their character's kind of point of view, and it was going to be effective. And you didn't have to script them word for word. Had there been that scripting process involved, and had we had a chance to, make sure everybody laid eyes on that script who were involved in it and or on the receiving end of it, it might not have happened, but we might not have ever got a show done either at that point, because we weren't set up that way. Things are different now. Things are different in 2019 than they were in 1996. But it was what it was, and it happened, and you can't put the bullet back in the gun, so to speak. So, it was unfortunate. But I do remember there was a ton of fallout. Was it great TV? Absolutely. It was great television. Great television. But I can certainly understand how that great television had, especially when it affects your wife and your kids. When you get that personal and you start weaving in, personal issues like drinking and things like that, that have really no place in a promo. Unless everybody's cool with it. And that's something that should have been discussed beforehand. I can certainly see how that would have a really horrible impact on somebody's family and therefore the talent.
Let's go down the rabbit hole a little bit there because, but before we do, I do want to mention that this skit, just to give you sort of a frame of reference, this happens in the middle of what is essentially a tribute show to Arn, because there's lots of sound bites and quotes and interviews and highlights of his career. But the other wrestlers are paying tribute to him as we go sort of in and out of the breaks, and we're seeing clips of his career. So it is very much a celebratory episode for Arn Anderson. And then, of course, in typical heel fashion, the nWo is here to mock it. And Arn's been on record as saying he didn't like it, and he had to find out if it was a personal attack, because it did, in his opinion, cross the line. And he wanted to have a conversation with Kevin Nash about it because he felt like it was in poor taste. But Arn has said that one of his faults in the business is not knowing when he could say no and when he should say no. But most importantly, the could part. There may have been lots of things he didn't want to do, but he wasn't ever sure if he said no, does that mean now I could jeopardize my job? And you have to appreciate from Arn's perspective, he's only ever been employed by WCW as a wrestler. Now he can no longer wrestle. If he causes a big stink here or says no to something, or it's difficult to do business with, knowing that Nash has certainly got more political stroke at this point, could that affect his ability to earn an income? That's obviously the concern. Kevin Nash would say, I thought I was okay to do this because the cooler I used that night was actually in real life Arn Anderson's cooler. So in Kevin Nash's point of view, I did what I thought was okay. It was, brought to me by Terry Taylor. We went through it. We worked it out. We spent a lot of time on the makeup, and sort of to get it over, I got a cooler from Arn Arn's actual cooler. And it took him about an hour and a half to get dressed up, and he's taking credit for the idea, but a lot of the verbiage and a lot of the, agenting of it was all on Terry Taylor. And Arn's wife, when she makes the call, says, Kevin Nash made you look like a stupid fucking drunk. And Ric Flair's wife is chiming in saying, you guys look like a bunch of boobs. There's a lot of heat here. And Kevin says that it's no big deal. To him, he felt like after they had the conversation, it was put to bed, and Arn walks over to him and has a beer with him that night at the hotel bar. And I don't know how much of that is real and how much of that is not, but clearly maybe when the wives get involved, people feel like they need to take a different stance. I'm sure we'll hear from Arn on this in the future. I guess we haven't mentioned yet, but we do have a new podcast starting with Arn. You can follow it on social media at The Arn Show. But he's off TV until September 12th, when Ric Flair comes back and they reform the Horsemen. When I'm saying back, I mean after his big feud with you. And then he finally returns, and it's a special night in Greenville. Another big moment. It feels like whenever you need one of these big sort of real emotional moments, if you put the microphone in Arn Anderson's hand, you're going to check all the boxes. Fair to say?
Understated. Yeah. More than fair to say.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.